Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today, I'm going to be covering one of my favorite books of all time, Taran Wanderer. Now, this is the fourth book in the Chronicles of Prydain series. This is the cover art that I recall having back when I purchased it the first time as a kid. I originally bought this when I was a teenager. I forget, maybe 13 or 14 years old. And I bought the yearling books version of this, which really is just a difference in cover. The cover art was the same. The font for the author, Lloyd Alexander, was different. It was a deep red burgundy color. I don't think I ever got rid of the book, but I don't have it with me in New Mexico. All of that is back east with it eventually needs to be packed up and moved out here. However, it is a book I bought new off the shelves, and it is worth buying used as well. Honestly, I would buy this new again regardless. It is well worth the money I paid for it, and I really appreciate it. This is allegedly a third Laurel Leaf printing book, March 1983. I don't see any information about the artist for the cover art, but this is a coming of age book. It is about a young man. I think a lot of the aspects of this book are more about coming into adulthood in a gender neutral way. The setup for the book is interesting, but there is an author's note I really like, and it opens with this paragraph. This fourth chronicle of Prydain begins as a gallant, high-hearted quest which soon becomes more intense and perhaps more essentially heroic than the preceding adventures. For here, Taran comes to grip with a merciless opponent, the truth about himself. This is meant to be a serious tale, in the way that all humor is serious and all fantasy true. And if there is no conventionally happy ending in fairy tale terms, there is still a most hopeful ending in human terms. So, what I like about that opening paragraph is that it puts it pretty well. This isn't a fairy tale ending with that generally heroic ending. It is a very human book. It says he learns to reshape his life out of his own inner resources, for there must not only be an end to childhood, but also a beginning of manhood. And he does actually use that phrase in the author's note. I would argue a lot of the principles covered in this story are neutral in regards to womanhood and manhood. But I really love this book because it is so interesting. It starts throughout the series. Taran, the assistant pig keeper, isn't a powerful or perfect main character, and that's one of the things I complain about. In some of my rants, I complain about certain female characters and sometimes certain male characters that seem too good at the role they're given, that they're perfect swordsmen or swordswomen, they're they're the best duelists, the best assassins, the best magic user they know, the best this, that, and the other. What the Chronicles of Prydain focus on is a character that truly is from humble origins. He is successful in the first book, not in defeating the bad guy, someone else does that, but in catching up to the runaway pig that he has set out to catch. And that pig, Henwen, is important for the big bad and for the heroes to save and that kind of thing. Taran's quest is not in defeating the Horned King. He is not the hero that saves the day in that classic way. in each of the books moving forward, he's not the one that necessarily saves the day in the archetypal way. So he's not that grand heroic character, and he doesn't feel that way. So coming into book 4, he doesn't feel confident about himself, but he does want to feel that way about himself. And the first chapter puts it pretty well. The thesis, as it were, of this story: all that I have, I owe to your kindness. And this is Taran speaking to his caretaker, Dalben. All that I have, I owe to your kindness. You have given me a home and a name, and let me live as a son in your household. Yet who am I, in truth? Who are my parents? You have taught me much, but kept this always from me. Since it has always been thus, Dalben replied, why should it trouble you now? Speak up, my boy. If you want truth, you should begin by giving it. Behind your question, I think I see the shadow of a certain golden-haired princess. Is that not so? Taran's face flushed. It is so, he murmured. He raised his eyes to meet Dalben's. When Eilonwy returns, it is in my heart to ask her to wed, but this I cannot do. This I will not do until I learn who I am. An unknown foundling with a borrowed name cannot ask for the hand of a princess. What is my parentage? I cannot rest until I know. Am I lowly born or nobly? To my mind, Dalben said softly, the latter would please you better. It would be my hope, Taran admitted, a little abashed. But no matter. If there is honor, yes, let me share it. If there is shame, let me face it. It takes as much strength of heart to share the one as to face the other, Dalben replied gently. He turned his careworn face to Taran. But alas, what you ask I may not answer. Then let me learn for myself, Taran cried. Give me leave to seek my own answer. And so, from there it goes on into a discussion of, do you really want this? Yes, I really want this. But the point is that thesis, he doesn't know who he is, whether he is a child of humble farmers or the lost child of a lord. And this is one of those kinds of discussions you see in another really good coming of age book that I really love, The Horse and His Boy. But I think Taran Wanderer handles this issue in a more responsible and mature way. It's why I prefer Lloyd Alexander's solution to C.S. Lewis's. The Horse and His Boy, it turns out that Shasta, the sole son, adopted son of a fisherman, is actually the Prince of Archenland, and it is his destiny to be the one to save Archenland from its greatest threat in history. That no greater threat will face Archenland, and no greater threat has faced Archenland. It remains independent throughout the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and it remains an independent nation until the last battle. But in Taran Wanderer, what happens is Taran seeks to find himself, and in the end doesn't find an answer per se. What he finds is self-confidence, that he is self-assured that who he is something he is comfortable with and satisfied with. And on the way, he encounters so many different people, and in situations, he encounters a dispute with a lord that he knows that has to make a decision, and the lord says, if you are a adopted farm boy or a lost noble, doesn't matter, you have a noble heart. But Taran isn't ready to hear that, because he doesn't want an easy way out. He wants to find himself his own way and not take a side branching story and say, well, okay, I don't know who I am, but I will gladly be the adopted son of a lord who has none. And in the end, all these various people that he meets along the way, he stops and faces them, constantly trying to get to his end goal. Now, the cover art showcases a story that involves the Eilonwy side of things and not the Taran side of things. But it's one of those episodes on this rolling snowball of a story. And what I really love, this isn't a spoiler for the end, because the story isn't about the end itself, but the various steps along the way to get there. And this book is a great example of that. I saw myself. In the time I watched, I saw strength and frailty, pride and vanity, courage and fear, of wisdom a little, of folly much, of intentions many good ones, but many more left undone. In this, alas, I saw myself a man like any other. But this, too, I saw. Alike as men may seem, each is different as flakes of snow, no two the same. You told me you had no need to seek the mirror, knowing you were Anlaw clay shaper. Now I know who I am, myself and none other. I am Taran. Anlaw did not reply immediately. Then he said, if you have learned this, you have learned the deepest secret the mirror could tell you. Perhaps it was truly enchanted after all. And then there's parts that I will not spoil because that does kind of spoil plot elements, but he says, as for my parentage, he added, it makes little difference. True kinship has not to do with blood ties, however strong they be. I think we are all kin, brothers and sisters, one to the other, all children of all parents. And the birthright I once sought, I seek it no longer. The folk of the free comets taught me well that manhood is not given but earned. Even King Smoit in Cantrev Cataphor told me this, but I did not heed him. Lonio said life was a net for luck. To Hevid the smith life was a forge, and to Dwivak the weaver woman a loom. They spoke truly, for it is all of these. But you, Taran said, his eyes meeting the potter's, you have shown me life is one thing more. It is clay to be shaped as raw clay on a potter's wheel. Anlaw nodded. And you, wanderer, how will you shape your clay? I cannot stay in Marin, Taran replied, as much as I love it. Caer Dal Ben waits for me as it has always waited. My life is there, and gladly I return to it, for I have been too long away. Thus Taran rode from Marin with Gurgi at his side, and as he did, it seemed he could hear voices calling to him. Remember us, remember us. He turned once, but Marin was far behind and out of sight. From the hills a wind had risen, driving the scattered leaves before it, bearing homeward to Caer Dal Ben. Taran followed it. And what's fascinating, a lot of that there's nothing about that self-analysis that is strictly masculine. This isn't a coming into manhood story that is strictly about manhood, but in coming into adulthood and accepting oneself, all one's flaws and all one's favors. That you are good at things and you have struggles, but you also need to accept yourself. That isn't to say that the acceptance comes without ambition. Taran still does desire things and he does want to be better, but he knows who he is, and so he can end that one quest. Which leads into the High King very well. There's a lot of continuity in each of the books in the Chronicles of Prydain, but I think the continuity between Taran Wanderer and the High King is the greatest, in that all of the elements that feature in Taran Wanderer resurface in the High King. All of the people he made friends with, all of the places he visits come back into play in the High King, and he becomes every bit of the leader of men that he was developing into throughout Taran Wanderer. And I think that is one of the better versions of the farm boy to king kind of archetype. Taran Wanderer, he is that farm boy throughout book 4 and really through the end of book 5. He is eventually more, but it is through his own self determination and strength that he claws his way to that additional power. And really, that is why I love Taran Wanderer. That everything he gets is through his own power and through his own self recognition. And I wish a lot of books would try to rise to that level, because even if you get halfway to the high standard that Taran Wanderer sets for this kind of story, you will have already made a masterpiece. And this book, Taran Wanderer, is a masterpiece. An unrecognized one, or at least unappreciated, I think. To everyone that has read this book, this is a masterpiece, but it is not as widely recognized or as popular a book as it should be. I think if you put any coming of age story, coming into manhood story next to Taran Wanderer will be better than all of them. It may not have the best prose, it may not have the most important actions, it may not have the grandest scale, but in starting with that thesis, I don't know who I am, but I don't want to wed Eilenwe or ask for her hand until I know. That thesis resolves itself expertly. Yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this book in the comments. I could go on for an hour about it. I'm trying to really shorten it down. But this book is well worth its money. I have it back east, and now I have a copy here at home. And I'm really glad I do. It is worth paying for multiple times. So yeah, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.